In the moonlight filtering through the high windows of the Library of Alexandria, a woman sits alone among scrolls that contain the accumulated knowledge of the known world. This is the year 30 BCE, and outside these walls, an empire is deciding her fate. But she is not reading the military dispatches. She is not studying the maps. Her hands rest instead on a small alabaster box, unmarked except for a single symbol. Older than Egyptian, older than Greek, older than anything scholars in this great library have ever been able to name. This is Cleopatra VII, Philippater, Pharaoh of Egypt, lover of Caesar, lover of Antony, mother of 4 royal children, speaker of 9 languages, and the last of the Ptolemaic dynasty. But this is not a story about her beauty, though Roman poets will obsess over it for centuries. This is not even a story about her famous romances, though they will become the stuff of legend and tragedy and 1,000 retellings. This is the story of a woman who understood something the Romans never could, that power is not a thing you hold, but a thing you translate. And translation, she learned long ago, is the most dangerous act in the world. 3 questions wind through her life like threads of smoke through these library halls. What was she really seeking? Dynasty, legacy, or something without a name? What did she see in the faces of powerful men that made her choose alliance over independence? And what was written on the papyrus inside that sealed box? The one she received as a child and never opened. The one she touches now in her final hours. The box sits between her fingers, warm from years of carrying, smooth from decades of nervous touch. She has never broken the seal. Perhaps she is afraid to. Perhaps the mystery is more powerful than any answer could be. Outside, the Roman general Octavian, soon to be Caesar Augustus, is preparing his final terms. The city holds its breath. History is about to fold her into its pages, ink still wet, truth already transforming into story. But before we reach that ending, we must return to another library, another night, another version of this woman who has not yet learned that knowledge and power are not the same thing at all. She is 12 years old, and her father is dying, slowly, publicly, pathetically, Ptolemy IV. Auletes, the flute player, has just returned from exile in Rome, bought back his own throne with borrowed Roman gold, and now the debt is crushing Egypt like stones placed one by one on a chest that cannot breathe. The palace at Alexandria is not a home. It is a cage of conspiracies where her siblings circle like sharks, where her father drinks himself into stupors, where the servants whisper about which child will be eliminated next. The Ptolemies have a tradition. They marry siblings to siblings, kill brother and sister with equal efficiency, and drown their own children when the throne's arithmetic demands it. Young Cleopatra does not play with other children. She sits in the royal library, not the great public one, but the smaller collection in the palace, and she learns. Greek, Latin, Egyptian, Hebrew, Aramaic, Ethiopic, Troglodyte, Median, Parthian. Languages stack in her mind like armor, each one a way of seeing the world differently, each one a key to a different kind of power. Her tutor is an old scholar named Philostratus, who survived 3 regime changes by being too valuable to kill and too wise to take sides. He brings her the box on her 12th birthday, a gift, he says, from her father, though she suspects her father barely remembers she exists. "What's inside?" she asks. "A papyrus, very old." "What does it say?" Philostratus smiles, and in that smile is something sad. "No one knows. The language predates everything in our collection. Your father received it from a tomb robber who claimed it came from a city that existed before the pyramids, before the first dynasty, before Egypt had a name." She turns the box over in her small hands. The alabaster is cool, smooth as river stones. "And my father gives it to me," He said, Philostratus hesitates. He said to tell you it contains the only power that survives death. He thought you would understand what that meant, even if he doesn't. She keeps it. Of course she keeps it. She places it in her room, on a shelf beside her bed, and some nights she holds it while falling asleep, feeling the weight of untranslatable words pressing against the thin walls of stone and seal. Her siblings, Berenice, Arsinoe, the two younger Ptolemies, watch her with the calculation of people deciding which threat to eliminate first. She watches them back, learning the grammar of betrayal, the syntax of survival. The box teaches her its first lesson. Some things become more powerful when you don't open them. Mystery is a kind of territory. The unknown is a form of strength. By 15, she understands that her education is not about knowledge. It is about reading the unwritten. Her father, weak and desperate, makes her co-regent alongside her 10-year-old brother Ptolemy XIII. It is not an honor. It is a cage with two lions. The palace advisors, Pothinus, Achilles, Theodotus, are men who have learned to rule through the puppet strings of royal children. They do not want a pharaoh who thinks. They want a mouth that speaks their words, hands that sign their decrees. But Cleopatra has spent her childhood in libraries, while they spent theirs in barracks and counting houses. She knows things they don't know she knows. She understands that Egypt is no longer truly independent, that Rome is the sun around which all Mediterranean power now orbits. She reads the maps not of what is, but of what is becoming. Her father dies when she is 18. The advisors immediately move to sideline her, to elevate her brother, to reduce her to ceremonial irrelevance. The marriage between her and Ptolemy XIII is announced. Sibling weddings, the family tradition. But everyone knows it is a pretense. The boy is controlled by his advisors. She is meant to fade into the background, another woman erased by the mechanics of masculine power. She does not fade. She begins appearing in public documents alone, her name before her brother's, a violation of protocol that makes the advisors nervous. She has her face carved on coins without the boy pharaoh's image beside it. Small rebellions, carefully calculated provocations. The advisors respond as she knew they would, with force. In 48 BCE, civil war erupts. She is driven from Alexandria, chased into the desert with a handful of loyal followers. She is 19 years old, technically Queen of Egypt, effectively an exile with no army, no treasury, no throne. The sealed box travels with her, wrapped in linen, carried by her most trusted servant. She has never opened it, will never open it. But she touches it at night when the desert wind howls and her situation seems impossible, and she thinks, translation. Everything is translation. Power from one language to another. What can I become that they will understand? The night she decides to bet everything. The Mediterranean is black as ink, and just as full of possibility for writing new stories. Gaius Julius Caesar has arrived in Alexandria, chasing his rival Pompey through the wreckage of Rome's own civil war. But Pompey is already dead, murdered by Ptolemy XIII's advisors as a gift to Caesar, his severed head presented like a tribute. The advisors smile, confident they have pleased Rome's most powerful man. Caesar weeps. Not because he loved Pompey, they were enemies, but because the murder was crude, without honor, without the dignity Caesar believes power should possess. The advisors have miscalculated. They have shown themselves to be small men playing at big games. Cleopatra, camped with her small army on Egypt's border, hears of this. She understands immediately what the advisors do not. Caesar is not impressed by violence. He is impressed by intellect, by audacity, by the unexpected. She has herself smuggled into the palace, wrapped, some say, in a carpet, though later sources will embellish and doubt and transform this detail into myth. The truth is simpler and stranger. She walks into Caesar's presence carrying nothing but her wit, and the understanding that she is about to translate herself into something Rome has never seen before. She is 21. He is 52. The room smells of oil lamps and papyrus and the metallic edge of political tension. Outside, her brother's advisors plot. Inside, she begins to speak. Not in Latin. She uses Greek first, the language of philosophy and learning. Then she shifts to Latin so perfect it surprises him. She quotes Roman poets he didn't expect an Egyptian queen to know. She discusses military strategy with the precision of someone who has studied Caesar's campaigns. She does not flirt. Not yet. She demonstrates that she is the only person in Egypt who understands what Caesar actually wants. Not another client king, but a partner who can think. The sealed box rests in her chambers, untouched. But its lesson lives in her approach. Don't give them what they expect. Give them the mystery of what they never imagined you could be. Caesar's response is not immediate. He is too careful for that. But over the following days, as tensions with Ptolemy XIV's faction erupt into street fighting, the Alexandrian War, scholars will call it later, Caesar makes his choice. He sides with Cleopatra. Not because she is beautiful, though she is striking. Not because of romance, though that will come, but because she is the better bet, the sharper mind, the partner who can translate Egypt into something useful for Rome. By the time the war ends, Ptolemy XIII drowned in the Nile, the advisors dead or scattered. Cleopatra is restored to the throne, pregnant with Caesar's child. 22 years old and about to transform from exiled princess into legend. But she has learned something in those desperate months. Power given can be power taken away. She needs to become something more than Caesar's ally. She needs to become untranslatable, someone Rome cannot reduce to simple terms. She gives birth to a son and names him Caesarion, Little Caesar. The message is clear. Egypt and Rome are now bound not just by treaty, but by blood. Caesar, ever careful about Roman political sensibilities, does not officially acknowledge the boy, but neither does he deny him. Cleopatra consolidates Egypt. She restructures the grain supplies, strengthens the economy, rebuilds the military. She is not interested in being a figurehead. She studies administration with the same intensity she once studied languages. Egypt is her text, and she is learning to read its needs, its weaknesses, its potential. In 46 BCE, Caesar invites her to Rome. It is a calculated risk. Rome does not love foreign monarchs. Rome especially does not love powerful women. But Caesar installs her in his villa across the Tiber, treats her as honored guest and ally, and begins the subtle work of showing the Roman elite that Egypt, under Cleopatra, is valuable, sophisticated, wealthy. She walks through Rome like someone translating two texts at once. Egyptian majesty for those who need to see power, intellectual curiosity for those who respect learning. She dines with senators, discusses philosophy with Cicero, who hates her but cannot dismiss her, and makes Egypt seem less like a conquered territory and more like a partner. The sealed box travels with her even here, wrapped in purple silk, kept in her private chambers. Her servants know not to touch it. She holds it some nights when sleep won't come, when the weight of being constantly translated, Egyptian to Roman, woman to queen, person to symbol, becomes too heavy. What is written inside? She has theories, a spell, a prophecy, the true name of God, the secret of eternal life. But the truth is, she doesn't want to know. The mystery is more useful than any answer could be. It reminds her that some things remain untranslatable, that there is power in what cannot be reduced to simple words. Caesar grows bolder in his ambitions. Rome whispers about kings. The senators grow nervous. Cleopatra watches, reads the undercurrents, understands that Caesar is approaching a threshold from which there is no return. March 15th, 44 BCE, the Ides of March. Caesar is murdered on the Senate floor, 23 knife wounds, blood pooling on marble, the Republic's violent answer to one man's accumulated power. Cleopatra is still in Rome when it happens. The city erupts into chaos. She has to flee quickly, quietly, back to Egypt with her young son. The villa across the Tiber is ransacked. Caesar's will is read. Caesarion is not mentioned. Caesar's great-nephew Octavian is named heir instead. She returns to Alexandria shaken but not broken. She has lost an ally, but she has learned something crucial. Even Caesar, brilliant, victorious Caesar, miscalculated the translation of power from military victory to permanent authority. He moved too fast, revealed his intentions too clearly, gave his enemies too obvious a target. She will not make the same mistake. Egypt stabilizes under her rule. She is now 25. Mother of a son she insists is Caesar's heir regardless of Roman law. Pharaoh of a kingdom that is still wealthy, still crucial to Rome's grain supply, still independent in ways that matter. The sealed box sits in her study, on a shelf beside maps and scrolls. She has not opened it in 13 years of carrying it. Sometimes she thinks, perhaps when Egypt is truly safe, perhaps when Caesarion is grown, perhaps when I have translated everything I need to translate. But deep down, she knows she will never open it. The box is not about what's inside. It's about the discipline of not knowing. It's about carrying a question through your entire life and refusing the easy answer. Rome tears itself apart in civil war. Octavian versus Mark Antony, Caesar's heir versus Caesar's general. Cleopatra watches from Alexandria, reads the dispatches, waits to see which translation of power will emerge victorious. Mark Antony summons her to Tarsus in 41 BCE. It is not a request. Rome has decided to divide the world. Octavian takes the west, Antony takes the east. Egypt, wealthy and crucial, must declare its position. She does not arrive as a supplicant. She arrives as theater. She sails up the river Cydnus on a barge dressed in gold, perfumed sails, silver oars, dressed as Aphrodite, surrounded by attendants dressed as cupids and sea nymphs. The whole city of Tarsus stops to watch. Antony, waiting in the marketplace to receive the Egyptian queen as a subordinate, finds himself suddenly eclipsed by spectacle, outmaneuvered by someone who understands performance better than he does. This is the beginning of their relationship, not the love affair that poets will immortalize, but something more complex. Antony is everything Caesar was not: emotional, impulsive, Greek in his sensibilities, drawn to pleasure and grand gestures. Where Caesar was calculation, Antony is passion. Where Caesar wanted Egypt as an ally, Antony wants to become part of its mythology. And Cleopatra sees in him something unexpected, a mirror to her own situation. He too is caught between worlds, Roman by birth, Eastern in temperament. He too is trying to translate himself into a form of power that doesn't quite fit the categories available. They become lovers, yes. But more than that, they become partners in a shared vision. What if the future of the Mediterranean is not Roman, but something new? What if East and West could merge? Greek culture and Roman military power and Egyptian wealth and mysticism combining into something unprecedented. For 3 years, they try to build this vision. Antony divorces Octavian's sister, a calculated insult. Cleopatra bears him twins, then another son. They create a court in Alexandria that blends cultures, where Romans wear Egyptian clothes and Egyptians speak Latin, where the rigid categories of nationality and identity begin to blur. The sealed box watches from her private chambers, silent witness to this experiment in translation. She still has not opened it, perhaps because she is too busy trying to translate herself and Antony into a form that history will accept. But Octavian, cold and patient in Rome, is reading a different text. He sees not cultural fusion, but Egyptian contamination. He sees not Mark Antony, but a Roman traitor seduced by a foreign queen. He begins to write his own translation of events, preparing Rome to see what he wants them to see. The war, when it comes, is inevitable. Octavian declares not war on Antony. That would be civil war, Romans killing Romans, but war on Cleopatra. This is the translation that matters. Frame the conflict as Rome versus Egypt, West versus East, civilization versus seduction. In 31 BCE, the fleets meet at Actium, off the western coast of Greece. Cleopatra brings 60 ships of her own, her personal fleet. Antony commands the rest. Octavian's admiral Agrippa is cautious, methodical, brilliant at naval strategy. The battle unfolds slowly. Not a sudden clash, but a grinding, tactical engagement, where every movement matters. Antony's ships are larger, built for the eastern Mediterranean. Octavian's are smaller, faster, more maneuverable. Then, at the battle's turning point, Cleopatra's fleet breaks away. Her 60 ships turn and sail for Egypt. History will debate this moment for 2,000 years. Did she flee? Did she see the battle was lost and make the rational choice to preserve her ships and treasury? Had she and Antony agreed on this beforehand as strategy? Or did something else happen? Some signal misread, some moment of terror, some calculation that what mattered was not this battle but what came after. Antony follows her, abandons his fleet, his men, his last chance for victory. The remaining ships, seeing their commanders flee, surrender or scatter. Octavian wins without having to win. The story writes itself. Antony betrayed by his foreign queen. Roman general unmanned by Egyptian seduction. It doesn't matter what actually happened. The translation is complete. They return to Alexandria together, defeated but not yet destroyed. They still have armies, still have Egypt's wealth, still have each other. But something has changed. The experiment in cultural fusion has failed. The world is not ready for their translation. Or perhaps they mistranslated themselves, tried to become something that existed only in their imagination. The sealed box sits in her study, untouched through triumph and disaster. What power survives death? She is beginning to understand the question differently now. The months after Actium are strange, a suspended time where defeat is certain but hasn't yet arrived. Antony swings between despair and defiance. He builds a small house by the harbor, calls it his Timonium, after the famous misanthrope Timon, and pretends he wants to retreat from the world. But he keeps returning to the palace, to Cleopatra, to their children, unable to commit to either withdrawal or final resistance. Cleopatra is more practical. She tries to negotiate. She sends Octavian gifts, offers him tribute, suggests that Caesarion could rule Egypt as Rome's client. But Octavian's responses are cold, vague, designed to keep her hoping while his armies advance. She begins testing poisons, experiments on prisoners, observing how different toxins work, which are fast, which are slow, which cause pain, which bring peaceful sleep. It is the research of someone who knows how the story ends but wants to choose the manner of the ending. The children, Caesarion nearly 17 now, the twins with Antony, the youngest son, are sent away, hidden, given chances to escape. She is translating them out of this ending, trying to give them futures in a world where she won't exist. Antony's remaining allies defect. His armies melt away. Octavian's forces encircle Alexandria, the city that survived Alexander, that endured the Ptolemies' constant civil wars, that remained the intellectual capital of the known world. This city now holds its breath, waiting for Rome's final sentence. She walks through the library at night, touching the scrolls, thinking about all the translations contained here. Greek to Egyptian, Egyptian to Greek. The accumulated wisdom of centuries, all of it attempts to move meaning from one form to another, to preserve knowledge across time and change. The sealed box is in her hands. She has carried it for 27 years, more than half her life. She is 39 years old. Not old, but old enough to know that some questions don't have answers. Old enough to understand that her father's gift was not the papyrus inside, but the discipline of never reading it. August, 30 BCE. Octavian's forces breach Alexandria's defenses. The city falls quickly, not because its people don't fight, but because Antony's remaining soldiers know the ending is already written. Antony receives false word that Cleopatra is dead. In his grief and despair, he falls on his sword, the Roman way, the honorable death. But the wound is not immediately fatal, and servants bring news. She lives. She has barricaded herself in her mausoleum with her two most trusted servants, Iris and Charmian. They carry him to her. Up the stairs, through the half-finished tomb she has been preparing for years. He dies in her arms, blood soaking into her robes, and his last words are not grand or poetic. He just asks her to remember him as he was at his best, not as he is at his end. She is alone now except for Iris and Charmian. Octavian sends word, surrender, and she will be treated with respect. But she knows what respect means, displayed in his triumph through Rome, paraded as a captive, reduced to a symbol of Rome's victory over the exotic East. The ultimate mistranslation, from Pharaoh to prisoner, from Cleopatra to cautionary tale. She prepares carefully, bathes, dresses in her royal robes, writes letters, one to Octavian asking to be buried beside Antony, others to her children, short and practical advice for surviving in a Roman world. And she takes out the sealed box for the last time. It sits on the table in the mausoleum. 27 years of carrying. 27 years of not knowing. The only power that survives death, her father said. She understands now. It's not what's written on the papyrus. It's the fact that she never translated it. The mystery is the power. The unknown is what remains when everything else, armies, kingdoms, alliances, crumbles. She does not open it. Instead, she arranges it beside her, along with the letters, along with the symbols of her reign. The asp, if it is an asp, if the snake story is true and not itself a mistranslation, is brought hidden in a basket of figs. Or perhaps it is poison, the peaceful kind her research identified. Or perhaps something else entirely. History will not agree on how she dies, only that she does. That when Octavian's men break down the mausoleum door, they find her dead on her golden couch in full royal regalia, Iris dead at her feet, Charmian adjusting her queen's crown with her last breath before dying herself. Octavian is furious. He wanted her alive, wanted the triumph, wanted the symbolic victory. Instead, she has translated herself one final time from captive to autonomous, from victim to author of her own ending. He tries to have her revived. Impossible. He brings in snake charmers to suck venom from barely visible marks on her arm. Too late. She has already left, already crossed into the realm where Roman power cannot follow. But Octavian is a master of translation too. If he cannot display her living body, he will display her story. He commissions statues, poems, histories, all showing Cleopatra as seductress, as danger, as warning. Within a generation, the real woman, polyglot scholar, skilled administrator, strategic thinker, is buried under layers of Roman propaganda. She becomes everything she tried not to be, reduced to simple terms, translated into Egyptian temptress, her intelligence rewritten as cunning, her political partnerships rewritten as sexual manipulation, her choice of death rewritten as despair rather than defiance. The Library of Alexandria will burn. Some say Octavian's forces start the fire, some say it happens later, some say it never burns at all but slowly decays. The truth itself becomes untranslatable, lost in competing sources, contradictory accounts. The fog of time. Caesarion is executed. Octavian decides there cannot be two sons of Caesar. The other children survive, raised in Rome by Octavian's sister, eventually married into Roman families, their Egyptian heritage diluted, translated, erased. And the sealed box? It disappears from history. Perhaps Octavian's men take it, trying to open it, finding inside, what? A blank papyrus, a prophecy fulfilled, a language no Roman scholar can read. Perhaps it is thrown away, dismissed as meaningless. Perhaps it is destroyed in whatever fire consumes the palace. Or perhaps one of Cleopatra's servants saves it, understanding its true value. Perhaps it is carried to some distant place, buried with someone else. The mystery preserved even as the woman who carried it dissolves into legend. 2,000 years later, we are still trying to translate Cleopatra. Every generation rewrites her, projects onto her their own questions about power and gender and East versus West. She becomes feminist icon. She becomes cautionary tale. She becomes romantic heroine. She becomes ambitious villain. But maybe all our translations miss something essential, that she herself was engaged in an act of translation her entire life, trying to turn intellectual power into political power, trying to translate Egyptian sovereignty into a language Rome might respect, trying to become something that existed in the space between categories, in the gap between what was expected and what was possible. And that sealed box, that papyrus she never read, that language no one could decipher, maybe it was always empty. Maybe her father, weak and dying, gave her a beautiful fake, a cruel joke. Or maybe the papyrus exists but contains nothing profound. A shopping list, a laundry inventory, some mundane text that 2 millennia of mystery would render ridiculous. But it doesn't matter what was actually inside. What matters is that she carried it, unopened, through exile and triumph, through pregnancy and war, through love and betrayal, and the final choice of death. What matters is the discipline of not knowing, the power of refusing the easy answer. The only power that survives death is not what you conquer. It's not even what you know. It's the questions you leave behind. Questions so profound they outlive empires, so complex they survive every attempt to reduce them to simple answers. Cleopatra was not betrayed by men, though men betrayed her. She was not undone by beauty, though Romans obsessed over it. She was not even defeated by Rome, though Rome won the war. She was undone by the impossibility of translation itself, by the fact that some things cannot be moved from one language to another, one world to another, one way of understanding to another, without losing what makes them true. And somewhere, in the ruins of Alexandria, in the underwater palace archaeologists keep discovering, in the silence between historical sources, that sealed box remains, metaphorically, if not physically, still unopened, still unknown, still asking, what is power? What is worth knowing? What survives when everything else crumbles? Perhaps the papyrus inside says, in that ancient language, the only power that survives death is the power to remain untranslated, to keep something of yourself that the world cannot reduce, cannot simplify, cannot turn into a lesson or a warning, or a myth, to carry the mystery all the way to the end. And perhaps that's why she never opened it, because she already knew, because she was already living that truth. And somewhere in the space between what history claims and what actually happened, Cleopatra still sits in her library at midnight, hands resting on a sealed alabaster box, speaking 9 languages but keeping one thought in a tongue that has no words, the thought that some things are more powerful when they remain mysteries. That translation is always betrayal, that the only way to survive history's judgment is to give it a story it cannot quite finish telling. The box remains sealed, the question remains open, and we keep returning, generation after generation, trying to translate a woman who made herself untranslatable, trying to solve a mystery she knew better than to solve herself.